Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today it is the 12th of July, 2022, and our show today is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. On today's Locked On Big 12 podcast, we look at the biggest question facing each team as we head into the 2022 season, really 2022 media days as they begin the 13th and 14th. So Wednesday and Thursday, we'll discuss a question facing each one of those teams coming up next.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Thank you all for listening, watching, subscribing. We just passed 1,300 subscribers, so let's keep that rolling. Subscribe if you have not already. Tell your friends. Want to thank you all, too. Had our best week ever last week. We made it into the top 200 on the iTunes sports podcast list. So that was really cool for us to be up there and saw some of the biggest growth. We are one of the top 10 most listened to college channels. We were number 3 in YouTube views last week at the Locked On Big 12 podcast. So we're glad you all are a part of that. Keep it going, keep it growing. It's been great to interact with you all and things like that. Also want to touch on, before we get going today, some of the comments you all gave yesterday. If you haven't watched it yet, I talked about promotion, relegation, and a super league and how it could work in the Big 12, not just the Big 12, in all of college football, and how it makes sure the Big 12 and other conferences could be included. Kind of want to talk about some of the responses that you all gave. Steve Payne said he started off feeling a bit like he didn't like the idea very much. Then listened and kind of said, yeah, I mean, the idea is that you give some small schools hope, a long shot, and at least you give hope it sells tickets and keeps interest. Yes, exactly. And that is why we did this. That was kind of the point of the exercise, right? Make sure we can maintain hope for smaller fan bases, because why do you care if it's not there at all? Why should Cincinnati fans care at all if they can't have access to the playoff? Some people don't believe it. This is a good idea. Some people think it's because, relegation is already there, promotion, and it's got some problems, but it really is a TV product. It makes for a lot of good. And some of you all thought that, hey, we're losing rivalries and pageantry. College football is dad's going to be a pro model. Why should we even care at this point? It's a fair point. Somebody said, Lord Raiden said that everyone will watch the best games when they're on TV. I agree, but you could argue the best games of football are in the NFL, and we like college football because we have an investment in it. We love our schools, and if our schools aren't a part of the bigger story, why do we go and watch? So they're going to professionalize just like the NFL. If it's a professional model, it's a pro football type sport, then why would we watch if there is an alternative to pro football or to college football that's a better version of football, especially if we have allegiances. I'm sure a lot of you out there have NFL teams. I know a lot of you all are Cowboys fans in that neck of the woods. And I know, a lot of you all are fans of obviously different teams. Those of you in the, if you're fans of Kansas State, you guys are, probably fans of the Chiefs maybe, or the Broncos. I know Broncos country can extend pretty far, obviously up into Iowa State territory. There's tons of teams there in that Midwest area. Iowa State's David Montgomery is on the Chicago Bears. I don't think he's still in the Bears. So maybe you're a Bears fan, whatever the case may be, right? We have a lot of us have interest in the NFL, and we'll go and watch that if we want pro football, not college, as it is right now. So, or going to a pro model in college. Some of you think that relegation's got no business here in North American sports. That is, for the other leagues. So there is a variety of opinion on this. When I keep hearing from you all about what you think about promotion, relegation, Super League, how do we best include the Big 12? The idea of here really being, if we're heading towards Super League, and that's what it feels like we're doing at this point in time, how do we make sure everybody feels included? And I know that's not, it's like, oh, we have to include everybody, no participation trophy. No, how do we make sure all of our teams can get in so we don't ruin the sport that we love, right? Why is March Madness great? Because the VCU Rams can make the Final Four, right? Butler make back-to-back, championship games, right? Loyola Chicago makes all the way to the Final Four. Like, there's a reason why we love the tournament, because it gives so many opportunities for schools like that to happen. Now, college football is more restrictive. We know that, but and I saw somebody said the recruiting's, it's going to get more disparaged. It already is. Like, go and look at European soccer. I mean, Chelsea, Man City, United, Liverpool, Bayern Munich, Juventus, Madrid, Barcelona, those teams already get a majority of the good players. How is that any different than what we have right now? It's really not. The rich keep getting richer. Resources are there. And Premier League, though, you'll see teams start spending more once the resources do get there. So those two things are very, very similar. The rich are already getting richer. It's still proceeding that way. So I think this does add some interest in that respect. And it doesn't do a whole lot to fix that problem, but we're not trying to fix that problem right now, are we? We're creating super leagues, and in those super leagues, there's already bigger teams. I mean, UCLA is just going to the party because UCLA is in Los Angeles, right? UCLA is not one of the better Big Ten teams. Michigan, Ohio State are. Oklahoma and Texas are getting invited because they're two huge brands. But look, Alabama and Georgia already have a Oklahoma fans probably argue they're up there with them, sure. But Alabama and Georgia have a leg up on those schools that they're adding. A&M was added now, is trying to get in that mix, but has not achieved a level of success yet that is kind of commensurate to what they're investing. So I would say, that on this front, kind of touching on realignment here as we move towards the real part of the show. But a lot of your all's questions that, how did this work out? I mean, kind of the things are already trending a certain way. We're trending towards a super league. If we're heading that way, the best way to make sure that we all get involved is having kind of this promotion and relegation to add exciting games that involve teams from the lower leagues. That's just my 2 cents. All right. Quick word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. Go to LinkedIn today. When you all do, you guys can post your job for free. Or if you're hunting for a job, you can go there as well. Sun's coming out for small businesses now after COVID. You guys can create a free job post in just minutes on LinkedIn Jobs if you need to find somebody to hire. It's the largest professional network in the world. Over 810 million people are on there. Nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn every single week. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon. That's linkedin.com/lockedon to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, so I've got a question here, kind of a big picture question for each Big 12 team. We got the poll that was released. We got the first team all Big 12 that was released. Reactions to those in your podcast feeds and here on YouTube as well. Go check that out. Today, a kind of big picture question for each of the Big 12 teams as we head right for media days, once again, starting tomorrow on Wednesday. So we'll go from the highest ranked teams in the preseason poll. We'll work our way to the back. So number 1, Baylor was picked to finish first. My biggest question for them is, can you do it again? Now, we know we've seen Baylor football has success consecutive years. Sure, it's definitely possible. But this group of coaches, while they stay together, and I know obviously that Joe McGuire is now gone from that group, but they retain, obviously, offensive coordinator, retain defensive coordinator, retain head coach. There's continuity there, other assistant coaches as well. But we've talked about this a bunch, the shifting on that Baylor roster, right? New quarterback coming in, new running back, and have to find a new number 1 option as well. Really good offensive line, very good defensive line, replacing some stuff in the secondary as well as the linebacking core. So can you do this again? I'm not saying they pulled a rabbit out of the hat. Not saying, heist of the century, some incredible thing, and heist of the century. Some of you all are pro wrestling fans. That'll come into play later on in the show. So just a little bit of a warning there for you. But this schedule this year at BYU, at Iowa State, home for Oklahoma State, at West Virginia, at Texas Tech, at OU, at Texas. Man, I mean, when they're going on the road this year, they've got some really difficult games. At BYU is not going to be easy. At Jack Trice will not be easy. They'll have a better team. Not going to be easy. At West Virginia at night, we already know it's going to be a night game on a Thursday night. Not going to be easy at all. Texas Tech on the road, not going to be easy. At OU, they'll be dogs. And at Texas, depending on what happens there, it's the last game of the year. So we'll see where they're at that point in time. But, I think there is a whole lot of reason to trust the infrastructure at Baylor. Totally agree with that. Can you do it again? Can you repeat again as champion? I mean, this is not an easy thing to do, especially for a school like Baylor that, it's where sure they've had success, but trying to repeat as Big 12 champion, incredibly hard. Programs with a lot more cachet have a difficult time doing it. Oklahoma was able to pull it off 6 straight years, right? And it's really impressive that they did. Two in a row is going to be tough. Baylor's in a good position. But let's see. I mean, how good is Blake Shapen going to be? How difficult are these early tests? They kind of shape them. Luckily for them, that was no pun intended to shape them. Albany first, and then you go to BYU. Difficult home for Texas State, at Iowa State, home for Oklahoma State. Sure, you might see 4-1, 5-1 in there. I mean, if you're a Baylor fan, but easily could drop 2 losses if they hit that big meat of the conference schedule. So difficult schedule, new quarterback, new running back, and they have to find wide receivers as well. Can they do it again is the big question. So can you run it back in a way with a different group? That's what the great programs do. Oklahoma, they were picked number 2 in the poll. Does head coach Brent Venables look as good as it sounds? I'm sure we're going to love what Brent Venables has to say this week at Big 12 Media Days. He fires me up when he speaks, man. I think he fires a lot of us up. We hear BV talk, you want to run through a wall for that man. Well, does this carry over? Does that kind of carry over to him as a coach? I know there's some complaints about recruiting momentum right now for Oklahoma, but I think they're still going to have a really good team on the offensive side. What can Brent Venables do on defense with that group? Because they did lose a whole heck of a lot. Still some decent players returning, but what can they do with that group to make things click once again? Does head coach BV look as good as it sounds? Now, I love their schedule. I've mentioned that a whole lot. I picked them to win the league this year. Plenty of questions for them, but the other question, obviously, I think we're all asking is this transition going to be one that makes sense for a guy who's a longtime coordinator? I mean, it makes sense he takes a job now, but how good does it look? All right, Oklahoma State. What will be their strength? I thought the best thing Mike Gundy did last season was adapting this team to what they did very well. Running the ball, playing defense, having Sanders make some plays when they had to at certain times. That's what this team did well. Mike Gundy relied on that last year. Lost a lot of defense, lost Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator. Obviously lost a really good wide receiver in Tay Martin, loser starting running back in Jalen Warren. So questions, obviously lost, on the specifically on the defense. I mean, you're losing a lot besides that defensive line is going to be really, really good, but you've lost a decent chunk of that team. And so now you didn't lose your quarterback, but we've got a lot of questions about how good he's going to be. So somebody might say the biggest question is, hey, how good will Spencer Sanders be? No, to me is what's going to be their strength. Because I think there's a world where, Derek Mace could coach this team up and they could still be a really good defensive team. But what's their strength and how do they rely on that strength? Can they do it the same? Will it be their passing game? Will it be their running game? Can they find a defense to complement that running game? This team this year needs to find an identity. Now, they had a really good spring, it sounds like. But once again, I think there's so many questions for them about what can they look like defensively and also how good, they've got pieces in place. Like, this is going to be a pretty decent football team. Mike Gundy turns out 8 wins like it is his job. It is his job, but that's what he does. So the question is, what's the ceiling of the team? Can they find the strength? Because, I mean, you can be a not hapless team, but kind of a team without an identity. And if you have good enough players, kind of fake it till you make it to 8-9 wins, when you've got that much pedigree like Mike Gundy has. So I think the question is, what is the strength going to be for them in terms of functionality? Like what is not the best part of the team, but what is the most productive part of the team and how do they mix that in? Because they did such a good job of that last year. Texas. Quinn Ewers be the leader and enough of the player that he needs to be? They played carousel with quarterback last year, and I've got plenty of questions on the defensive side. Don't worry, Pete Kwiatkowski, we're looking at you. But it's not a foregone conclusion that Texas's offense is going to be a machine. Should it be? 100% yes. There is no reason why, with those 2 running backs and that group of wide receivers and the guys they have at tight end and their offensive line, it should be better. And that much talent at quarterback, this offense cannot be a machine that lights up a lot of teams, particularly in the Big 12. There's some questions on some of these defenses. So can they light it up? Can they be that offense that we think? I think the answer should be yes, but it's going to come down to their quarterback. Is he a guy that people rally behind? Is he a guy that demonstrates really good leadership on the field, or some of the concerns, some of the worries brought about, his leadership and his priorities, are those real or not? Once again, I don't know. I'm not saying if they are or not. I picked them to finish second in the league this year. I'm very high on Texas this season. So I think there are plenty of questions for them, but obviously it all starts with Quinn Ewers. Like, what is this guy? Because we haven't seen him play any football yet. And so I think it's pretty reasonable to ask that question. I'm asking that question. I still feel like, even if you have Hudson Card quarterback, this team's still be really good at offense. So I'm saying, how big can that ceiling, how high, I should say, should that ceiling be? 5, Kansas State. Okay, here's a wrestling thing for you all. Can they cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase that they have earned themselves? In professional wrestling, in the WWE, they have what is called the Money in the Bank. It's a briefcase. There is a 6-man match for it. Somebody climbs to a ladder at the top of the ring, pulls down the briefcase, takes it down. What that briefcase gives them is the ability to challenge for a title whenever they want. So if a champion's having a match and it's the end of the match and he's really tired, he just won or lost or whatever, the championship switch hands, whatever, you'll see the guy with the briefcase come running in, cash it in, and then try to pin the champion to take the belt. Well, this year, the Big 12 is all over the place. We're not sure who the best teams are in this league. We're not, I think we know who the better teams are, but we're not sure what order they're going to finish in. We're not sure who's going to have, that season. We're like, okay, Baylor was just seeing this coming. Wow, Oklahoma, Brent Venables pulled it off. Oklahoma State is back. Texas pulls the momentum back and puts themselves, with the recruiting momentum and pairs it up with on-field performance. Sure, all those things could happen. That's all the questions we're asking. Kansas State has had 6 players on first team All Big 12. They got their coach coming back, obviously, Chris Kleiman. They had a new quarterback, Adrian Martinez. They have made a change at the quarterback position or at the offensive coordinator spot with Colin Klein coming in. They've got good weapons in offense and defense and special teams. They've got good pass rushers. They've got a good linebacking core. They've got a solid secondary. They have, once again, good pass catchers. Offensive line and a couple nice pieces, but we'll see how if it's as good as it normally is. They want to push the pace a bit more. They've got, in my opinion, the best player in the conference in Deuce Vaughn in the backfield, the guy I voted for Offensive Player of the Year preseason. So, it's all there to capitalize on what is a I'll call it not weak, competitive Big 12. They have the briefcase. Kansas State has the briefcase. Can they go and cash in and make the most here? That is what I'm trying to see here. So can they cash in their Money in the Bank briefcase? Quick word from our sponsors, and we'll rip off the end of this list. Today's show is brought to you by Bet Online. Go to Bet Online and betonline.net today. When you all do, use the promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON, Locked On. You guys can do that today. It is the service that has great odds, great lines, everything that you all need today. So go to Bet Online and betonline.net. MLB, college football futures, college basketball futures, NFL futures, all of that at Bet Online and betonline.net. All right. Also, we have just saw some news come across here. The Pac-12 schools expected to stick together. So we'll have more on that on a different show. Let's finish up, though, these questions. Iowa State at 6. Well, Matt Campbell it up this year. Somebody did vote. One person voted them to win the league. Shout out to that person. Not really sure. That's kind of a hope and a wish, but hey, crazier things have happened. So with Iowa State, like, can they kind of return to old Iowa State? They got Will McDonald, Xavier Hutchinson. A lot of questions about Hunter Decker as a quarterback, right? Can they become old Iowa State once again, where they're sneaking up on people, because they kind of have that chance this year? That is my big question with them. Will Matt Campbell return to Matt Campbell form? Because he wasn't last year. We have to be honest about it. I think he can. I think 7 wins is possible for them. I think it's kind of the 6-5, 6-7 range. So we'll see. 7, Sonny Dykes. Give this team an identity. Remember last year, the biggest problem with TCU football was that they didn't have an identity. Now, Sonny Dykes, is an offensive-minded coach. We assume it's going to be an identity. But in year 1, can this team? I bet in year 2, year 3, sure, they'll have an identity. But will offense be this team's identity here in 2022? That's a huge question. West Virginia's at number 8. My question here is, how hot is Neil Brown's seat? Some of you all think it's hot. Some of you all said, hey, it's not as hot as we think it is. New offensive coordinator, obviously, with Graham Harrell coming in. New quarterback coming in as well. And JT Daniels, a lot of talent, but has been injured at times, so we'll see there. Questions at running back. I know people like their defense, but I'm not sure how good it's going to be. Wide receiver, people like Bryce Ford and Sam James. I'm not totally sold this being an ass-kicking unit, if you will. So let's see. Let's see what happens with West Virginia. But I'm wondering, what does West Virginia have to do this year in terms of wins to make sure Neil Brown's job is safe? Texas Tech. Will this be more than a year one? They've got a tough schedule, but they do have a lot of talent at quarterback. The recruiting class looks really good, but there's a lot of questions at, wide receiver and on defense. How good will this team be at linebacker and up on the defensive line, right? So, there's some positives, there's some negatives, but is this going to be a traditional year one where they go 5-7, 4-8, and they just kind of wait for the momentum to build, or put together a nice 7-5 year and start catapulting that momentum, keep that thing rolling from the recruiting aspect, to the next season? We'll see a lot of positivity for them, especially around both their coordinator hires and especially with Zach Hitley. A lot of questions there. And then for Kansas at 10, how do we define progress this year, right? They're picked to finish last. 3 wins is progress because you won 2 last year. But, what does it look like? Because this is a really true year one. Remember this, that last year for them, they were kind of, competitive in the last few games. All right. And that's really because Lance Leipold came in so late in the game in May. I mean, really didn't see a whole lot of his team in spring. Had to watch them had to watch them really in the summer workouts to get a good feel for them. Now this is a full year one. So do we treat it like a year one? Do we think they should build off what happened last year? Who knows? But it feels like it's a weaker league, so you could catch more teams. So what defines progress this year? I'm going with 3 wins, but I think that's a big question there. All right, make sure you follow us on Twitter at LOBig12. We'll have reactions to everything happening at Big 12 Media Days. Okay, so that's very exciting. Obviously, news coming out. Brett Yormark expected to make remarks as well. A whole lot going on here. So, all right, what you all need to do, make sure you follow us at LOBig12. Make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you guys also subscribe to the podcast wherever y'all get your podcasts. Okay, until next time, as always, my friends, stay safe.